Well, hello, welcome to Wellness by Design. Fatigue is something a lot of people complain about. And if you want to know how to resolve fatigue, especially long term fatigue, then you're going to want to listen to the show. I'm really excited to have my friend and colleague, Dr. Evan Hirsch, back on the show. Welcome, Evan.
Jane, thanks so much for having me on.
Well, I'm really happy to have you back because I know you are the expert in fatigue. You've written a book called Fix Your Fatigue, and you are well qualified to talk to people about how to resolve their fatigue. And I know you're going to have some great tips for them today. So I'm going to tell them a little bit about you by reading your bio. Evan is a world-renowned fatigue expert and is the founder and CEO of the International Center for Fatigue. Through his best-selling book, podcast, and international online programs, he has helped thousands of people around the world resolve their fatigue and long hauler symptoms naturally. That's what I'm into. And is on a mission to help 1 million more. He has been featured on television, podcasts, and summits. And when he's not at the office, you can find him singing musicals, dancing, and playing basketball with his family. Do you have a song for us today, Evan?
Well, I'm working on the song Being Alive from Company by Stephen Sondheim. I've got a vocal competition coming up in January. So there's a couple songs I'm working on right now, but that's
Oh my
that's my most exciting one that I really am
God. Okay.
enjoying.
Well, we'll talk about fatigue because that's what everyone is interested in, and maybe we'll get you on another time to sing for us. But good luck in your competition. Hello,
Thank you.
Margie Smith Thorne says hi. So if anyone's watching, you want to say hi, or if you have questions, just type them in the comments, and we'll get to them. So Evan, let's hear a little bit first about how did you get into fatigue and zeroing in as that area of expertise.
So it really started when my wife got fatigue. So I graduated medical school, took a year off, went to my residency in family medicine, fell in love with my wife very quickly thereafter within the first couple of months of residency. And then 3 months after we fell in love, then all of a sudden she couldn't get out of bed. And she was running a business and it was really challenging, and she was still able to do what she needed to do, but had to take breaks throughout the day and whatnot. And about 3 years later, she was 80% better. And then we got married, we had a child, I started my own business. And then a couple of years after that, I got fatigue, and it lasted for about 5 years. And it just about destroyed my life. Uh,
Wow.
just about destroyed my relationship because here we have this new child. My wife is getting over her fatigue, and I can't help out at home.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm at work, I really couldn't do my work. I had brain fog so bad and body pain so bad that I was completely distracted. I could be present with the person when they were sitting in the chair in front of me, but once they left, I couldn't remember anything about them. Thank goodness I had an electronic medical record. And I had to keep hiring people to do my job, whether it was administrative or being a clinician. So I really struggled and just about lost my business, lost my relationship, all that,
Wow.
until finally I decided enough is enough. I was already practicing functional medicine at that time. And I decided that I knew that if I could find the causes of my fatigue, that I would be successful. And so I started researching, going to conferences, reading everything that I possibly could, found out that there were 33 different causes of fatigue, and went through that process for myself, resolved my fatigue. And then at this point, I wrote a book about it. And now I've helped thousands of people
Mm-hmm.
resolve their fatigue.
So tough, hey, the fatigue and then the brain fog and the pain to go along with it, and we do see those commonly together. Now I will link back to the previous episode when you were on, where we were talking about the 5 causes. We want to dig a little bit deeper in this time, specifically for this long-term fatigue that a lot of people suffer from. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I know you talk about like 3 levels of fatigue. So what are these 3 levels of fatigue that you help people with?
So these 3 levels of fatigue really are determined by how your fatigue is remedied. So if you change your lifestyle habits,
Mm-hmm.
where you are drinking more water, getting more sleep, getting more movement, and what am I missing? Getting more good food,
Mm-hmm.
then you are, and that resolves your fatigue, then that's a level 1 problem. If you
Okay.
do all those things and then you still are tired, then that means that you have a level 2 or a level 3 problem. Now, a level 2 problem means that if you replace the deficiencies that you have, basically the things that are not in the body that are supposed to be in there, whether it's hormones or nutrients, which are vitamins, minerals, mitochondrial function, neurotransmitters, if you
Mm,
replace those things and it resolves your fatigue, then you had a level 2 problem.
okay.
Now, if you are still tired after doing that, then you have a level 3 problem, which is um, the toxicities that have to be removed. So these are things like heavy metals and chemicals and molds and infections and allergies and negative emotional patterns and electromagnetic fields. So all those things that are in the body that are not supposed to be in the body. And so that's a level 3 problem that needs to be remedied when fatigue is more severe.
Okay, so we got the three levels. Now, Margie Smith Thorne, she mentioned, or Margie, said, I'm tired all the time. I have hypothyroidism. Where would you classify that?
So hypothyroidism is found in as a deficiency. And
Okay.
so that's when we're looking at the hormones, like adrenal gland dysfunction, which is a little triangular gland, sits on top of the kidneys and produces cortisol, which is one of our main anti-stress or stress management hormones, and then the thyroid, and then the sex hormones. So those are all grouped in the hormones. Now, what's interesting is that hypothyroidism is actually two conditions.
Mm,
The hypothyroidism basically means that you have low thyroid production, and thyroid is really one of these most important hormones in the body that increases metabolic rate, helps with energy and sleep and mood, and lowers your cholesterol and your blood pressure, and it's just an amazing hormone. But there's also a complement to that, and the question is always the why. Why does somebody have low thyroid? And oftentimes it's because of an autoimmune condition. 90% of everybody who has low thyroid has Hashimoto's thyroiditis or
hmm.
autoimmune thyroid, where basically the immune system is reacting to the thyroid and damaging the thyroid, and over time you end up damaging the thyroid completely.
Hmm.
So it's always important to also remember what is triggering that autoimmunity, and it actually comes back to these toxicities that we're going to talk about more in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you saying that autoimmunity is always related to toxicities or
For the most part, yeah.
really?
So, yeah, by definition, autoimmunity is the immune system reacting to something that's in the body, and then in turn, it ends up attacking the body
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
And I should say, by definition, it means the immune system is attacking the body. But generally, that always has to be, something has to be introduced to cause the immune system to become dysfunctional. And so
Right.
sometimes it's the immune system attacking something over here to the side, and then it turns around and goes after the thyroid because it looks like that thing. And that's called molecular
Hmm.
mimicry. And sometimes there might be something like, let's say, mercury that is inside the thyroid that the immune system is trying to get rid of the mercury, and it just so happens that it's going through the thyroid and damaging the thyroid in order to try to get rid of that mercury and take it out of the body. Because in reality, the immune system's job is to find the things that are in the body that aren't supposed to be there, bind them up, and remove them.
Right, right. And what a lot of people don't realize too, I think, is that autoimmunity is a spectrum. So you don't kind of have it one day and not have it another day. It builds over time. So these toxicities and things can just build in the body over time, which is why a lot of times we see autoimmune conditions do happen as people get older because we probably built up a lot of toxicities and so on in the body over time. And Margie mentioned that she has other autoimmune conditions as well, and I think we see that a lot of times when you have one autoimmune condition, you're already kind of on fire then and can get other ones as well. Okay, so we've talked about some autoimmune conditions, and often fatigue does go with those. And so how when you're talking about resolving the long-term fatigue for something like that, you're talking about dealing with the root cause, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So how would people go about um, resolving this naturally? Like if it's a level one, can they do something like that on their own by addressing lifestyle changes? Like where would you say to go with this?
So the first part of our program in step one is to assess all the causes that an individual has. And so
Hmm.
this is always the first and most important step, is to determine which causes you have, because everybody has a potential of 33 causes of fatigue, and
Yeah.
everybody who has fatigue ends up having 20 plus causes. I actually had 30 out of those 33 potential causes. That's what I
I,
had.
re- I remember you telling me that in our first interview. That was astounding.
Yeah, and so everybody has 20 plus causes, and so Joe Schmo over here might have causes 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and Sally Sue might have causes 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So you really have to figure out which causes you have. So that's what we do in step one, and the way that we do that is that 75% of those 33 different causes can be determined by symptoms alone, and then the other 25% really need labs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a lot that can be determined just with symptoms. And when you say labs, you're talking about getting testing done. Is that something that can be done remotely, or do people have to kind of go to your office to get that done? How does that work?
It's all remote, so we're 100% virtual. So I
Right.
work out of my home. Our team is all over the world, and our clients are all over the world. So everything that we do, you order stuff from online stores. They come to your home, whether they're supplements or labs. You complete them, and then you send them back in. And we have lab and supplement stores in the U.S. and the U.K. and the European Union and New Zealand. So, with the hopes to help as many people as we can all over the world.
Any in Canada?
We don't in Canada right now. Canada is actually quite challenging in order to, it's kind of crazy. It's just our, upstairs neighbor. And we're not able to get a lot of things to Canada because of a number of the restrictions that Canada has in customs. So we can still ship a number of things, but it just seems people haven't had a ton of success with getting what they need. You have to just jump through hoops and you have to be persistent. But you can if you are willing to do that, but not everybody is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So, so are you seeing any changes now? You know, we've had a lot going on in the world, and have you seen changes, like more people experiencing fatigue now than you saw before? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because oftentimes when people are home more, certain conditions may increase in incidence. And so, for example, mold is obviously in the home, and in wintertime, when people go into the home, we generally see more mold illness. Well, we're starting to see more mold illness with people since there's been quarantine and since people have been more in their homes. That's one thing. The other thing is that we're seeing a lot more chronic fatigue from long haulers, which is
Right.
basically you get the pandemic virus and you just never get over it. So sometimes you feel like you get over it and then you get all these weird symptoms back. And sometimes the symptoms just start changing and just getting worse over time. And so that's kind of what we're seeing a lot. And that really fits in well with our paradigm and the people that we're able to help because of these different causes that we mentioned. I talked about infections, and those
Right.
infections can be viruses and bacteria and yeast and parasites and Lyme co-infections, and now the pandemic virus, which has caused
Mhm.
such a problem. And so it fits in because everybody who has long haulers also has 20 different causes of fatigue, but they just so happen they have this specific virus from the pandemic. But then they also have adrenal issues and mitochondrial issues and thyroid issues and lifestyle habits and all these other things, heavy metals and chemicals and molds that need to be addressed in order for them to get resolution.
So you're saying a lot of those were in place probably before they contracted this one, and then now it's really all compounding together.
Exactly. The virus is the straw that broke the camel's back. And much like you
Right.
said, as we get older, we accumulate toxins over time. And I kind of think of the human as like a rain barrel,
Mm.
where, the longer that you're in the port, the more barnacles you get, right? And you're just accumulating toxins over time till eventually it overflows. And usually you think, oh, it's because of that mold exposure that I had 5 years ago, or it's because of that relationship that I had. I kissed somebody who had Lyme, or whatever exposure you may have had. But in reality, that was kind of just the straw. But there was this buildup of all these other toxins that ended up compromising the immune system, compromising the liver, and causing issues.
So you mentioned the liver. The liver, let's talk about the liver, because a lot of people, we can't see it. So a lot of people don't realize how hard it's working. And actually, when it works really hard, it uses a lot of energy, which then makes us feel tired. Let's just talk about the liver for a little bit. Let's riff on that, and let's hear what you've got to say about the liver.
Sure. The liver has a couple different phases of detoxification. There's phase one, glucuronidation. There's phase two, methylation and transsulfuration. And then oftentimes people might include it a little bit in phase three, which is kind of elimination. But what the liver is doing is often it's attaching things onto different molecules in order to process them through this very large filter that is the liver. And you can't tell the health of the liver by actually looking at liver function tests, which are on any traditional blood lab, a Chem 7 or a Chem 8 or a complete metabolic panel or whatever you want to call it. Is that the challenge is that those tests are actually telling you if there is liver cell death, where the liver cells are opening up, dumping their stuff into the bloodstream, and then you can measure whether AST, ALT, alkaline phosphatase, whatever is elevated. But in reality, it's much harder to know the health of your liver. And for the most part, most humans, because of all the toxins that we're exposed to, 100,000 pounds of mercury dumped into our oceans every year, and 86,000 different chemicals that we're exposed to on a regular basis. The question is not whether or not we're toxic. The question is, how toxic are we?
Right. We are toxic.
We're very toxic. And so we need to clean the liver out the best we can and give it as much love as possible. And one of the best ways of doing this is actually eating vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of different, you can use herbs, you can do castor oil packs, coffee enemas, so many different things. But just the best thing that you can do right now today is just eat more vegetables, avoid grains and glutens, and just try to keep it and decrease the amount of sugar, because those are getting stored as fat in the liver. So that's a little bit about the liver. It is a major detoxification organ that we have, and I think of it as a filter for the toxins that are coming through your body.
Yes. Okay. Some great advice there. So when you talk about vegetables, like, is there, are you talking about a variety, or like cruciferous better, or leafy vegetables? Like, are there any that are better than others for the liver?
So there are some that are better, and those are more of the cruciferous variety. And so when we're looking at broccoli or cauliflower or even kale and Brussels sprouts, those can be better, but in general, there is benefits that we don't know that exist in having a multicolored vegetable medley, right? The more colors, the better. And so that's always kind of the best way to go. But there are some specific ones where oftentimes we would say, okay, yeah, take this in high doses and it's going to be really helpful for the liver. But general rule of thumb is that you're going to want to have multicolored vegetables.
So eat lots of vegetables, drink water, I would think, stop the sugar, all these things we all talk about. And so you mentioned castor oil packs. It's such an old-fashioned remedy, right? But it's a really successful one, from what I understand.
It really is, yeah. And castor oil is a wonderful anti-inflammatory, and I describe it as like walking through walls. So what it does is it actually is very well absorbed. And so anything that you put with castor oil, and it's very well absorbed through the human skin. And so anything that you put with castor oil is actually going to diffuse through the walls of the skin into the bloodstream. And so you want to make sure your hands are clean whenever you're handling it. You don't want to have anything toxic on your hands. But as it's on its own, castor oil wherever you put it in the body, can decrease inflammation. So if you want to put it on the thyroid, if you've got thyroid conditions, if you want to put it on the liver, you can do that as well. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a pack. You can actually just take it, squirt it on the liver, rub it in, let it sit there for a minute, and then jump in the shower and wash it off, and it can still provide a lot of benefit. So you
Really?
want to, yeah, you want to make sure that it works with your life. And so, and there are some people who use the castor oil packs where you put it on the pack and then you sleep with it on the liver, and so that can be really helpful as well. But you just want to make sure whatever it is that it kind of it works with your life.
Yeah, yeah. I've done castor oil packs and very soothing, but messy. Very messy. Um, okay, I got a question from Bernice. Someone, Bernice is watching. She says, "Do you remember taking probiotics every day? Do you recommend taking probiotics every day?" This is a question I get asked a lot. What's your opinion?
Hey there, Bernice. Thanks for your question. So, generally, I say yes, but it really depends on what kind of probiotic you're using. Um, and what your gut looks like and whether or not it's a dysbiotic. So whether or not you've got the right bugs in there. So
Mhm.
the probiotic that I recommend is a spore-based probiotic because there's the best research that I've seen on cultivating good strains of probiotic, and that the product that I like is called Megaspore, and it's from a company called Microbiome Labs.
Okay.
And there's other ones, probiospore, and there's a couple of other spore based, but those I have found to be very helpful for folks. And what those are doing is that they're pushing the bad bugs out and increasing the number of good bugs in the gut, which is such an important part of
Mhm.
health, is
Mhm.
making sure that your gut is healthy. So generally, I'm trying to think of when you wouldn't want a probiotic like that. What do you think, Jane?
Well, I suffered from SIBO, and so for
Mm.
me, the probiotics weren't a great choice. So, SIBO, for people that don't know, I know Evan knows, but it's a small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So it's actually not necessarily not enough bacteria or even the right kind. It's just it's in the wrong place. It should be down in the large intestine. And it's moved up to the small intestine. So, kind of don't want to be putting more bacteria there. So that's my opinion, and what I experienced myself. So what do you think, Evan?
Well, I've found that the spore-based probiotics actually work really well with SIBO.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, this is great.
But a lot of probiotics are bacteria, and so
Uh-huh.
you're exactly right. So if you are putting bacteria into a place that already has too much bacteria and that's not supposed to be there, then yes, you can definitely have issues. And there's a number of things that you want to go along with this too, is that you want to make sure that you're actually removing the bad bacteria, yeast, fungus, whatever is present,
Hmm.
right? And then you want to heal the gut. But a lot of people jump into healing the gut and taking products that prebiotics and all that, which is actually probably an even more complicated question than probiotics,
Yes.
um, which aren't necessarily going to be helpful for you if you're not at the right stage in the process. So, for those who don't know, prebiotics are basically food for probiotics, or food for the bugs in the gut. And if you don't have good bugs in the gut, or if the ratio's off, and you take prebiotics, which can be even anything from sauerkraut to kimchi to a prebiotic supplement, they're going to then feed the bad bugs in the gut. So you have to make sure you remove those bad bugs first. You push out the bad bugs with the
Mhm.
probiotic. You starve it by doing like an antifungal diet or an anti-sugar diet, mainly with a lot of vegetables, right? And then you can start to um, repair the gut, but you don't want to repair it before you've done that other work.
Yeah, there's a process. There's a process. Yeah, exactly.
A
Okay,
process, I would
that
say, if I were Canadian.
I'm Canadian, but yeah, I don't know. I'm all mixed up. British parents, Newfoundland. Anyway, okay, so let's look at what else we want to talk about here. Oh, Bernice says thank you. So why is it so hard to treat long-term fatigue or long haulers?
So the challenge really is because it's about getting help. it's very hard to find somebody who is looking at all of these 33 different causes.
Right.
Because, even if somebody is a natural doctor or an integrative doctor or even a functional medicine doctor, oftentimes they're really good at replacing the deficiencies. So they're good at hormones and lifestyle habits, neurotransmitters, mitochondria, stuff like that. But it's when you get into these toxicities that we talk about that there's just docs just aren't knowledgeable enough, because each one of these things on their own is a really deep exploration. You have to have really deep understanding in order to be successful.
Right.
So oftentimes they may be good at heavy metals, um, but they don't know anything about chemicals and how to remove them, or they don't know anything about molds, infections. And if they know something about infections, maybe they know something about Epstein-Barr, but they don't know anything about Lyme and its co-infections, because a lot of docs are like, you know what, I don't want to touch Lyme, I don't want to touch mold. They're just they're overwhelming, to be frank.
Yeah.
And for me, I chose to not because I wanted to, because I had to go down that path for my health, the health of my family, and then consequently the health of my patients and clients. And so that's one of the reasons. The other reasons are because everybody has different causes of fatigue. So when I talked about somebody having 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, somebody else having 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10, that's really confusing to people. And so if your best friend has fatigue and they take B12 and they get a significant bump in their energy, and you take B12 and you don't, it's very confusing for people. And they forget that they have to come back to what are the causes that you have and which specific causes are those.
Hmm.
Another thing that is important to note is that sometimes it's really hard to get rid of fatigue if you're living in mold and you don't know it.
Right.
I would say, 8 out of 10 people are listening to this right now saying, I don't have any mold.
And they probably do.
And they do. We know that half of all the buildings in first world countries have water damage, and most of those have mold. And this could be a home that you have lived in at any point in your life. You could have been 5 years old. You lived in a home that had a flood every single winter, always smelled kind of musty, and you haven't lived in a moldy place since then, but you have mold in your body that's a problem, and it's producing mycotoxins. So it's very important, and this is one of those 25% where you really need the labs in order to determine whether or not there's mold in your body. And then you want to make sure that there's no mold in your home, because then you're just being constantly exposed to it.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the main reasons why it's hard to treat chronic fatigue and long haulers. Oh, and the thing about long haulers is that people don't realize that the virus is persisting. They
Hmm.
think that it's because maybe it's the remnants of the virus, and there's just nobody who's talking about this sort of thing. And there's a lot that can be done. We're having lots of really good success helping these people who've got long haulers. But there's not enough being talked about all of these different causes.
Evan, you don't mind taking on the complicated cases. But one thing I really love about your process, and we talked about it in the last show, and that is like you really do have a process. It's kind of like, an engineering process. I really like it. You're going through and figuring out all these pieces and pulling it together to help your patients. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I've got one last question I always ask. Where is it? Here it is. What's one action someone could take today to improve their health? What would you say, Evan? It's hard to
So
pick one, I know.
it's hard to pick one. It really depends on where they are in the process, because oftentimes this one I'm going to say, like, removing gluten from your life is huge for so many people. When we talk about these 20 plus causes that you have, I like to see them as like nails in the bottom of the feet. And so you have to remove a number of them in order to really get traction. But gluten's a huge one. I'm going to choose 2. I'm also going to choose mindset. I'm going to choose mindset because whenever you're feeling ill, whether it's chronic fatigue or anything else, you have to have gratitude and acceptance for where you are. And then you also have to have a vision for where you want to be. And then you also have to have, I think, empowering thoughts in order to be able to get you there, and ask yourself empowering questions. So, oftentimes we're so focused on putting organic food in our mouths, which is so important, but we don't think enough about putting organic thoughts in our heads, or good
Yes.
thoughts, clean thoughts, happy thoughts, thoughts that are empowering. 80% of the things that we think, the 80% of the thoughts we think are negative.
I know. I
And so
know.
we have to switch that around. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful at anything in life, frankly.
Mhm. I'm so glad you mentioned the mindset, Evan, because that's something it's kind of my wheelhouse with people, because I believe, and as you said, that if we have all these negative thoughts going on, then we're not providing, that's part of the environment our body is trying to heal in. And if we're not having positive thoughts and feelings, and feeling gratitude for what we do have, then we're in a constant state of stress, and we can't heal like that. Can't heal like that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. And the gluten. I mean, gluten is just one of those, if you got inflammation and you're still eating gluten, I don't know why. I really don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
So Evan, that was fantastic. Is there anything else? We just got we're at the end, but if you want to add anything else to what we've talked about today, if there's something we've missed and you really want to make that point, just let me know and talk about it now.
Well, I think that I just want to remind people how important it is to all the things that we've talked about today, these 33 different causes. Whoever you choose to work with to help resolve your fatigue, you want to make sure that they're addressing all of these things, and you want to know how they're addressing them.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for example, we have one-on-ones and we have group support, because being ill can be a very lonely proposition. So there's a wonderful community that's part of our program. And then we also have one-on-one hand-holding with like our health coach. And then for the negative emotional patterns that I talked about, we have coaches on hand that are nervous system retraining coaches. So you just want to make sure that every single one of these causes is going to be addressed. Otherwise, you're going to pull out 15 nails in the bottom of your foot and you still have 5 nails left, and it still hurts to walk. And maybe you got up to like 6 out of 10 energy, where 10 out of 10 is ideal, and you can't get the rest of the way there, and you should really only be giving a practitioner 6 months in order to know that you're on the right path. And if you're not where you want to be in 6 months, and you don't have a plan, and you don't know what the next steps are to get there, because sometimes it takes longer than 6 months. It can take 6 to 12 months to get rid of mold, heavy metals, chemicals, infections, some of these different things. But you want to know what the plan is, and you
Right.
want to make sure that it's something that jives with you. If you don't want to take antibiotics, don't take antibiotics. Look for somebody like me who is just using everything naturally, herbs and vitamins and all that sort of stuff, that's strong enough but isn't toxic, like antibiotics for infections, for example.
I'm going to have all your contact information. It's in the show notes there. But also, I know you've got this free ebook. It's your best-selling book on how to fix fatigue. So you can download it right here with this link. And I will have the link in the notes as well for people that are listening. And I know it's such a beautiful gift for you to give to people, and also to give us your time today. Thank you so much, Evan, for being on the show. And thank you to the people that joined in, asked questions, and are listening on the replay. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.